Good afternoon, viewers. Nation building rotates around use of power to create a national identity. National identity in terms of common culture, national identity, and a common good. Common good in terms of service delivery, that I mean delivery of clean water, health, among other social services that are rendered to the community. In this conversation, we are going to delve into the role of civil society organizations in nation building. To discuss with me this quite elaborate topic, I am joined by a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen. To put this topic into perspective, we have three first-timers on this show and one panelist that has already featured on this youth roundtable. Allow me introduce to the viewers to join us for this discussion. We have the founder and executive director of Nile Girls Forum, Ms. Pimer Peace Gloria Monica. Monica, you're welcome. You can say hello to the viewers.
Thank you so pimuch. My name is Pimer Peace Monica. Thank you for giving me the name Gloria. I am the founder and executive director of Nile Girls Forum, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
All right. Thank you very much, Gloria.
I'm Zane Muwanguzi, founder and team leader also Mind Speaks, and also a passionate person on mental health, young people's mental health in Uganda, and a human rights defender as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zane.
Well, thank you for having me. Good day, viewers. My name is Mbabazi. I am the public relations manager with Fronah Healthy Foods. We deal in different nutritious foods, for example, like anti-porridge. And I am here to talk about civil societies and advocate more on youth and national development. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Last but not least, the gentleman to my extreme right, Mr. Hafashaimana. I hope I've got that pronunciation right this time around. Yeah. Kindly say hello to the viewers.
Thank you so much. I'm Asiimwe. My name is Hafashaimana Asiimwe, and I serve in the Uganda National Students Association, UNSA, as the Secretary for National Affairs, but I'm also a member of the National Youth Council, Uganda.
All right. Thank you very much, panelists, for saying hello to the viewers. I'm very privileged and honored for having you on this panel today. So to put this topic into perspective, we all know way back into the pre-colonial and post-colonial Uganda, we had various organizations, civil organizations that started way back then. They started in terms of as labor unions, and then later on came and sprouted into civil societies. Later on, we see in the late 1980s to the 1986 and later on in the mid-2000s. We see them having a very serious agenda and fronting for national building and reconciliation into this country. So to better understand this topic, or to fast forward, give us a historical background, allow me to start with you, Mr. Hafashaimana, to put into perspective the historical background of civil society organizations and the role they've played in building the now Uganda today. Take us to that.
Thank you, Ndugu Douglas. First of all, the civil society organizations started manifesting in 1980s. And while we zero out to this discussion, you cannot do away with what it means by civil society organizations. And therefore, I want us to look at this as an area that is beyond family, that is beyond the state, okay? That means looking at this at the historical background of civil society organizations. The initial brains behind the civil society organizations looked at advocacy. Advocacy that is in terms of looking at how human rights are being observed in the whole world, and looking at the recent manifestations and the contributions of the civil society organizations, looking at Waiter raid of the United Kingdom, came up with a project that was meant to help people across the world by providing the safe drinking water. And in this case alone, it has, I think, contributed to supporting people close to 1.3 million across the world. And looking at the historical perspective of the civil society organizations, they have tended to do away with the government. But also the recent scandals of the Oxfam workers at Haiti, and issues to do with the funding climate change, whereby people are now moving away from the initial mandate of the civil society organizations to profit making. And of course, looking at the characteristics of the civil society organizations, they are supposed to be non-profit organizations. And as therefore we discuss and result to this discussion, we are only trying to focus at the impact that these civil society organizations have actually contributed to nation building. And looking at Uganda, a country where we are, you have had people like we have had people who have their own monies, the philanthropists of this country, trying to do maybe constructing schools to help the people, the younger generation. So looking at how tomorrow is going to look like, then that means if we have a group of people that is organized and they come up with some, they can be organized within among themselves. So looking at what such people have come up with, who have heard about the brain white, what people have been doing, even if it was your area MP from where they are coming from, they are trying to fit within the context of what the civil society organization are supposed to be doing. So regardless of the human rights defenders trying to speak, advocate for people, including lobbying from the government, I think there is a little more to do with the civil society organization. So that means as we zero to this discussion, we are trying to focus at if only these civil society organizations have actually lived to the expectations. So I think as we dissect this entire topic, I do believe that we have something to offer for this. But I want to say that the historical perspective of the civil society organizations has really been a very good one, on that we need to now check if it is indeed yielding to the expectations of what we want.
All right, thank you very much. Picking up from where you're from, you bring up a point of civil society organizations have engaged in advocacy, which is quite true. And you give us a very interesting historical background. Allow me to come to you, Ms. Jolie Mbabazi. From this historical perspective, in the mid-2000s, we witnessed a plethora of conflicts that happened in our country, Uganda, from northern Uganda down to the central. We saw in northern Uganda was termed as a hotspot of non-governmental organizations because of the insurgency that happened then. So looking at that historical background and how civil society organizations have come from the mid-2000s and now, he says that they have engaged in advocacy, and he raises the argument that they have not lived up to their bidding, but we shall come to that. I would like you to take us through have really these civil society organizations, one, lived up to their expectations, and two, if they have lived up to their expectations, if they have lived up to their expectations, what areas do you think they need to go on and do right?
Well, according to taking from Asiimwe, according to IMF and financial global entities, Uganda is ranked it's an undeveloped country. So this means that citizens in this country contribute less taxes, and the government finds it hard to fund the national budget. So civil societies come in, they have played a very big role in nation building because they have the ability to loop funds, resources from big entities. For example, DGF has funds very many NGOs in Uganda, or was funding very many NGOs in Uganda, and these civil societies have played a role like teenage pregnancies, sexual health in girls. There is also human rights development. So they have played a very big role in nation building.
Okay, picking up from where you left it, you made mention that civil society organizations play an important role in somehow subordinating in terms of lobbying for funding to push service delivery. You talk about the advocacy or fight against teenage pregnancy. So from there, exactly, if civil society organizations help in lobbying funding, because we know government, as a country like Uganda, our government has limited resources. So how far or how deeper has the fight against teenage pregnancy gone into solving the problem or leading to nation building?
Well, the fight has gone quite very far, because looking at an NGO like Action Aid Uganda, they have advocated, they have gone deep down in villages and advocated and sensitized young children in schools, teaching them on teenage pregnancies, the dangers, the outcomes, and this has helped a lot in nation building. That's what I have to say about the question.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Allow me to come to you, Ndugu, Mr. Don Zane Muwanguzi. Don Zane Muwanguzi has introduced himself. He's the founder and executive director of UNSA Mind Speaks. A brief synopsis of what UNSA Mind Speaks is: it's an organization that goes ahead to advocate for mental health. From your organization, you are an entity that embarks on fighting or spearheading the fight towards mental health. Recently, we saw in the newspapers that approximately 14 million Ugandans have mental issues, and we have seen students in universities commit suicide. We have also gone ahead and see a number of atrocities, a number of issues that happen around mental health. As UNSA Mind Speaks, in terms of nation building, what is your contribution, or what are you doing to see that we earmark or fight the issue of mental health?
I mean, so mental health has been something that is now coming up. Very many people are jumping ship, talking mental health. But normally, what I ask people is, do we really even understand what mental health is? Do we really even know how to talk about it among young people? Do we ourselves have mental health, or mental health is the problem itself? So very many people say, I have mental health, meaning they have a problem of mental health. But they just say, I have mental health. We all have mental health as people. It's just that sometimes as you get sick, your body gets sick. It could be the same with your mental health, that today I'm not okay, tomorrow I'm okay, positive mental health, maybe negative mental health, or a mental illness. But as far as national building goes and also Mind Speaks, we are reaching out to different young people in schools, advocating for mental health so that they can make informed decisions, informed choices like continuing with school, choices like avoiding early pregnancies, choices like avoiding HIV and AIDS, but this comes from a stable mental health. This comes from information. This comes from advocacy. When we look at the country itself, the newspaper you quote, I think I woke up one morning and my WhatsApp was full of that article. Everyone was sending me images. And my question is like, now that you have seen it, what are you doing about it? Why are you just sending it to me, myself, Why are you sending it to me? I'm not going to, I'm playing a part. That is why it is a civil society organization, not a civil society organization. I'm playing a part. So there is also other organizations that are playing a part. But I feel like how we are building or how we are contributing to the nation is that we are putting context to the problem that has already been existing but given less attention. Mental health has been there way before. There's been Butabika. Butabika wasn't built yesterday. It's a national mental health institution. So that means there's been measures, to treat people with mental illnesses, to provide counseling and therapy. There is the Uganda Counseling Association. It didn't start yesterday. It's been there to provide services, but there hasn't been context to the problem. How do we talk about mental health? Is it a society issue? Is it stigma? Do we all have mental health? Is it witchcraft, as people say, Is it a taboo to have someone with a mental health challenge in a family, So we have to say it is okay. We all have mental health. So once we start giving context, you realize very many people now start learning that it's actually normal to talk about mental health. It's normal to go seek for services. It's normal, to tell my child, okay, if you're not feeling well today, to go to school. How can we do about it? Do you want to stay a day or do you want to go play? So you realize that now you are preserving a lot of lives. You are preserving a lot of, informed decisions. You are building the nation, and we are doing that. We might not do it like firsthand, but through our advocacy and information sharing, people start making informed decisions and grooming the country.
Okay, from there, briefly, there is a common phenomena that if in Africa, even here in Uganda, that when someone goes ahead and says, I'm stressed or I'm depressed or something like that, and they just look at you like, yo, what's your issue? They look at you and they're like, are you normal? Like, we look at this as a white man thing.
Yeah.
It is not something that we as Africans believe. It's something that affects us. So as UNSA Mind Speaks, how best can we change that phenomena? And when you're done answering that, I would like also to bring Miss Monica to come in and tell us how best do you think that that phenomena can be changed, and how best can we involve the girl child, since you are the founder and executive director of Nile's Forum. So tell us, how best do you think we can, change that phenomena that is in people's minds and perspectives?
I think that also would go back to us. Who feels free to talk about their mental health right now? That goes back to. But also, if right here all of us didn't know English, how would we say that I am depressed in my local language? Yeah.
Do we even understand the word depression?
We don't even understand the word depression. But even before we go to understanding, do we have local language for a young girl, a young boy down deep in the village who hasn't gone to school to really understand that I'm actually having a mental health challenge? Yeah. So once we localize it, we are going to do away with the term a white man disease.
Thank you.
It's just that because we haven't localized it, put local terms to it and definitions to it. But once we do that, people will actually realize from the conversation that I've noticed the symptoms. I've noticed ABCD. Maybe it's been what has been bothering me since day one. So
all right,
that will help.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Once again, my name is Peace, and at Nile Girls Forum, what we do is we work with adolescent girls and young women, and we really focus on leadership, sexual reproductive health, and economic development. And based on your submission around mental health, I think the first thing is for really us to normalize conversations around mental health, because you would really realize that on an everyday basis, even just from my walking in here, if I asked you, how are you doing? You're going to tell me, I'm fine, because it's in our default setting that when someone asks how you are, it's just normal for you to say, I'm fine. So often cases, people do not engage further in those conversations to know, what, how are you doing? How is work, or how is home? But even when those conversations are brought, we always want to shield, in the frame of being resilient. I cannot tell you that I'm not well. But also one thing, as Nile Girls Forum, we are trying to engage with organizations like Awesome Mind Speaks, so that in our programming, we are intentional on issues around mental health, because mental health not only just focuses on that aspect of even the girls that we are talking about. How about the people at our workplaces? In most cases, it's just about the employee asking for their report, or if you do not submit it, that they don't have like that conversation with you to go further and say, was there a challenge somewhere? But you could find that someone is battling with an issue. It could appear small to you, but that particular issue is actually affecting their mental health. So I think really we as civil society organizations, it would really be great for us to be intentional in our programming to include that aspect of mental health, because mental health is a conversation that cannot be left out.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hafashaimana, I would like you to briefly tell us, as a country looking at our history from the perspective of the pre-colonial times to date, many people say that as a nation, we haven't really embarked on nation building. They say that we are focused rather on building a government rather than nation building. From way back from the colonial times, the pre-colonial and post-colonial, we have seen what has happened. Countries like Tanzania, as some people would love to pick an example, they say they have a common identity. As Uganda, they say we haven't had something that brings us together, something that makes us fight for a common good. So as a country, do you think we have earmarked on nation building?
Okay. As I answer that, I want to first let us know about how these civil society organizations are organized. In the first place, we have the organic civil societies. That includes all the civil society organizations that is respective of the within the ecosystem of the organizations, including the online service providers, including our bloggers that we know. And when I talk about the bloggers, you know what I mean. These are people who have tried to feed the information to the generation, depending on maybe whether you are on Facebook, whether you are on WhatsApp, And now to your question was direct. Has the government lived to support all of these? Of course, looking at the internet cost charges, that means the bloggers or the online service providers have been suffocated. That means in case I used to buy the data for 2,000, maybe 1,000 MBs, that means it is no longer that way. That means this line of service providers have been suffocated. The government has not supported this. Even when there are ongoing debates to see if they can subsidize on the government on the internet cost charges, I think they are still ongoing. So we are not sure yet. So I think in that way, the government has not supported. And looking at the generation that we are all in, whereby some universities and institutions is actually going e-learning, that means that line has also been suffocated. Now, looking at the organized civil societies, that is including the faith-based charitable organizations, or talk about the NGOs, the non-government organizations. And I remember when I was in high school, we used to have a yearly youth conference for young leaders, the Vision Conference, I think, through Cornerstone, the High School Leadership Development Initiative. And I remember while this was happening, young people from all over the country were always organized in a certain place to be met and talked to. And maybe the civil society leaders would be invited to offer mentorship, guidance, and whatever. And when each of us was trying to speak about the mental wellness, okay, the same timing, I remember I met the Life Mindset Changers Uganda. These are the people who teach you how to read. You feed your mind with what you read. And I want to say that I think even when the government has not yet lived to expectations of how they should support the civil organizations, I also want to say that there are some civil society organizations that have not actually wanted to either work with the government, even when in their mandate are supposed to be non-state influential. So that means that even when we are blaming the government not having been able to live to their expectations, I think we also have a blame for some of the civil societies on how they are actually having their relationship, working bilateral relationship with the government. So I think looking at that context, I want to say that the civil societies, they also have a role to play. I already mentioned that they have been faced with a funding climate change. I mean, whether by the international communities, like she talked about the IMF supporting this.
From there, you mentioned the issue of funding and funding being at times inadequate or government intervening. The question still stands. As a country, with the roles of civil society and among others, and to all the panelists, do you think as Uganda, we have embarked on nation building? Look at all the civil society organizations, those ones that focus on advocacy, those ones that are religious, all of them, all the categories of civil society organizations. As a country, as we're delving into the roles of civil society organizations, this question goes to all the panelists. Have we embarked on nation building?
I mean, it's very ironic a bit. When I was also in high school, I read a poem called Building a Nation. It's very ironic the way this person contributed to building a nation.
But I think, Onen, as you go ahead, to be straight, the answer should be not yet. My answer is no.
No, your answer is no.
Wait, my answer is not no, but the answer is not yet.
Not yet.
This is because if indeed the government has lived to these expectations, then we wouldn't be having this discussion here. We wouldn't be having an employment problem. We wouldn't be having the issue of an early pregnancy and early marriages. That means that our answer must be not yet. Okay. So our issue is now, what should the government do?
And that is where we are coming.
I
want to get all your opinions.
Yeah, I think we're in the process of building a nation. And it's going to be a process that is not going to end, because Uganda is not ending tomorrow. We're always going to be adding on to something. You're going to say, okay, roads are completed, but then there is a lot of accidents. So there is going to be another organization that is going to come and, do road safety. So there is going to always be. Look at a country like USA, which has a lot of structures, but now they had to, ban the abortion bill that they had passed. They had to reverse it. You get? So that means the organizations there are now going again to groundwork to redo the things that they had already done. They're going to redo them again. So there is a possibility that we can build a nation and we put up structures, but also those structures can fall down and we need to start again.
All right. You want to say something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, as youth, everything starts with us. We all have social media platforms. We all have, I know all of us, a highest percentage of youth in Uganda, they are on social media. It is going to start with us to advocate, talk about what's going on, how much support is the government supporting civil society organization. If they're not supporting civil society organizations, then we can talk about it. I'm very sure we have freedom of speech. People have been talking, they talk about everything that is happening in the country. So why can't you talk about the support? What is needed? What is needed for the nation to build? It is going to start with the youth, with us.
All
Yes.
right. As Nile Girls Forum, the question still is, as a country and as Nile Girls Forum in building the nation, have you embarked on nation building in terms of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and where you want to go?
Yes, thank you once again. As Nile Girls Forum, I would say nation building is work in progress. It's a continuous process. It's something that we cannot say we have arrived at, but it is something we can say has kicked off, and there is a stage where we are at right now. And as a civil society organization, I think it's really very important for us to also note that we are there to complement government efforts.
True.
And that is why in most cases you'd find that these issues we are addressing, they are not new. And most of these issues, it's not like these are things that are new to the government or is something that they have not made an effort towards. But as Nile Girls Forum, we are there in those communities to ensure that the policies that have been passed are actually being implemented. So we are able to monitor progress of how, for example, the National Sexuality Education Framework is moving, because you'd realize that issues like teenage pregnancies are issues that have just not started right now. They were there even with our great-grandfathers. You'd find that issues around teenage pregnancies were there, but now the context changes a bit because of health emergencies like the COVID-19 that came into play. And we as an organization, as Nile Girls Forum, we are making sure that we are there at the grassroots to complement those efforts that have already been made, because you'd find that you're not the only organization that is doing teenage pregnancy or things around, let me say, climate change or climate justice. So it's also really about us collaborating in the civil society space to ensure that we are driving the agenda home.
All right. As we started the show, I noted that national identity rotates around the use of power. Nation building rotates around the use of power to create a national identity. National identity in terms of national language, common culture, and common good. Common good in terms of service delivery, health, water, education, among others. And there are four catalysts of nation building. The first catalyst is the mechanism of democratization. The second catalyst is the mechanism of political development. The third mechanism is peace building. Last but not least is the means of protecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the state. Now, we're going to discuss all those four mechanisms and how we are relating it to the roles that the civil societies are playing. Let us start with the first catalyst, the mechanism of democratization. As a country, we have had turbulent times. Kenya recently concluded on its elections, and the civil society organizations in Kenya was commended for the teamwork and the versatility, that the assertion that they have in Kenya and Kenyan elections. So in understanding the means of democratization, we have various civil society organizations that look into the democracy process. They look into they look into the politics of the country. So have civil society organizations in Uganda, have they done enough to see that as a country they contribute to the nation building? Let me start with you, Monica.
Yes, as civil society organizations, really the conversation around nation building is something that we cannot run away from. And it has really been in different ways because still around the work we do, we have that component of leadership, and that leadership entails governance. So for us, it is really about, in order for everyone to be involved in the democracy processes, it's very important that we start with the younger generation. So because the moment we capture that generation, then we are able to make them effectively participate in these processes because they're now informed and aware of what happens within the country. So at Nile Girls Forum, what we're doing is we have a movement called the Peer Pals movement. And this movement, you have adolescent girls and young women, and we basically train them leadership and governance. In this, we are able to start from at their young age, from the age of 10, because it's between the age of 10 to 24. By the age of 10, you would find that even in schools, there are already, for example, prefect elections. And I think some of these things, the moment they get well acquainted with it right from their earliest stage, it is very easy for them to now be involved and also be able to hold their leaders accountable. But also, you'd find that there are leaders that become active in the political sphere among these girls and young women that we are actually bringing in this Peer Pals movement.
All right. You bring a very good point. You bring the aspect of mentorship. Mentorship that will soon culminate into possibly representation. Because my understanding of democracy is a form of government that seeks to maximize accountability, representation, and participation, which is quite true. Picking from there, I would like to engage Mr. Don Zane. She brings up the aspect of mentorship that will soon we shall see as they build a nation that will culminate into representation. Allow me to take you to the aspect of accountability. In last year, over 54 civil society organizations were shut down on allegations that they had not that they were operating without a permit, and others were charged with illicit enrichment. So on the aspect of accountability, civil society organizations are supposed to be one that bring out the aspect of accountable leaders. So what do you think went wrong? Do you think the accusations were right? If they were right, or if they weren't right, what kind of implication does it have in terms of more organizations coming up into the country? We are still tackling the aspect of mechanisms of democratization. Tackle the aspect of accountability.
I think I can't speak to the accusations if they were right or wrong.
Yes.
But I'll speak to what it implied to other people who are, saying, because I know colleagues that the organizations were closed. But it brings in a question that, the criteria of funding, especially in Uganda, you have to have some requirements for you to get funding, especially from big organizations, some of which were funding these NGOs that were closed. You have to have a permit. You have to be registered with the URSP. You have to have a TIN number. You have to have all those structures. You have to have policies. You have to, do audit reports. You have to file returns and all that. Do these organizations have all these? Some claim they did. I can't confirm or deny. They confirm they did. But I think also it speaks to, is this a fight that could be, overcome? Yeah. Was there warnings from the government that, hey, we are going to close the organization in such and such a day? Could you provide ABCD? Yeah. Could we look at your audit reports? Were there office visits to verify these organizations, before they were closed? Or did the government wake up one day and say, close ABCD organizations? Yeah. Was there maybe any aspect of, information that was being shared between these organizations that were a threat to the government or the people? We will never know, because there's not been maybe an official report, probably, that describes in detail why these organizations were closed and justifying the closure, right? Also, organizations themselves, some of them have spoken out, they have issued statements, but they're not in details. They don't mention if they received warnings. So I feel like this takes us back as civil society organizations, because we also worry, what if it was mine that was closed? What if it was yours that was closed? You know? And also I remember, I think a while ago, the NGO Bureau issued a list for reverification. And they said all NGOs should re-verify themselves. So people, you know, again submitted documents. I like to believe that the civil society organizations that complied are still operational, and those that didn't are non-operational. I think it's a good strategy by the government to make sure that organizations are working. They're not just dormant. Because if you registered maybe in the 90s and the organization is still in the system and you're not working, the government has a role, you know, to play that, to make sure that this organization is still serving people. Or if it is not, let's scrap it and create more room for organizations that are supporting the people. So I feel like that is, you know, that is a need that the government has to, you know, from time to time practice to verify, are people working, are people being served, or we are just having skeletons in the closets.
All right, thank you very much. Allow me engage you, Miss Jolie. From where he picked off, as you say, 54 non-government organizations were closed last year. Others were closed on grounds of illicit enrichment, others on grounds of they hadn't filed their tax returns, among other accusations. He answers the question of what kind of image does that create to the CSO world in this country. As a student of public relations, you're the public relations manager at Fronah Health Foods Limited, right? So, as a public manager at such an organization, what kind of image does this leave you and the organization in? What kind of perception does it hold for your organization, for the image of the country, and what kind of image does it give to the outside world or the donors outside that would love to support a cause in Uganda if possibly the government is shutting down these organizations on accusations that aren't justified even by law, if at all one would argue?
Okay, thank you. Well, we are forgetting that civil societies have challenges also. They are not well regulated by the government. They are, well, you say they involve in illegal activities like illicit funds and etc. So, as a peer at Fronah Healthy Foods, I see this as a very big challenge in that civil societies, they render services genuinely. They do it because they are non-profit organizations. They do it with a positive mind because they are doing it for people. For example, in Uganda, as I told you earlier, the average population is very poor, and this means they contribute less taxes to the national budget or to the revenue of the country. So civil society organizations, as I see it, to cope or to help reduce these challenges of them being put down, I think they should follow the laws and regulations. They should.
Allow me to engage with you there. Following laws and regulations, we have the NGO Act that regulates.
113.
Yes, we have the NGO Act that regulates the activities of the civil society organizations. Some of those organizations argue that they were on the right side and following the law. So from there, don't you think hasn't the closure of those organizations one way or the other affected your operation and your process of nation building?
Yeah, it has affected it because, like I said, they render services that the government cannot give to people. For example, our leaders, sorry to quote, our leaders, some of them when they reach down or in urban areas, they forget where they come from. They forget to go and advocate for or sensitize young people, give scholastic materials to people who cannot afford to, to go to public schools and etc. So civil society organization, I think they're affected so much in the way they're helping a lot. So I think the government should try and regulate these problems.
All right. Thank you. Allow me to engage you, Mr. Hafashaimana. We are still on the issue of the mechanism of democratization. They have discussed extensively various topics under the mechanism of democratization. As I earlier on said, democracy is a system of government that looks to maximize representation, participation, and accountability. Allow me to engage you with the aspect of participation under democracy. You're the secretary. You're the secretary for national affairs at Uganda National Students Association, a body that I believe represents the views of students. So, as the secretary, the aspect of participation, we have a population of 78% of Uganda being majorly youth. And many young people are crying or even yearning to be in spaces but do not have capacity to participate in spaces. What role, or how best are you trying to help? What role are you trying to do to mentor the young people, take up those spaces? But not only are you helping them, mentor them to take up those spaces, but also what exactly are you doing to see that there is more participation, there is more intake of young people into spaces?
Asante, ndugu Onen. You have just reminded me about the 1959 Rwandan Revolution, whereby one of the causes was the democratization policy. That means people then woke up and rose fighting for the democratization rights. If there was a need to participate in the political spaces, then that's the reason as to why that happened. And looking at UNSA, your question was so direct. What have we done to ensure that these young people, I want to inform us that UNSA is a body that focuses at the post-primary students. That means we oversee about 7 million young people who are in schools. Yeah. Now, initially, when we had just assumed office, we carried out a safe go back to school campaign. And this was to ensure that our young people get back to school where there are safer spaces to be talked to, be guided and mentored. Yeah. And having looked at that, that has not stopped. We still go ahead. The issue is that now that we're talking about the civil societies. Have we actually had all these other civil societies come in board to empower the young people? When you look at the African context, we have the Women for Change in Zambia, something of the sort. This means this is a group of women that has come up to advocate for the rights of the women. If in Uganda we have the woman emancipation, what has actually the National Women's Council done? We talked about the government involvement because we are looking at an angle of power. And now that we are looking at democracy, have they actually been able to get the awareness context to these women outside there? Looking at where I'm coming from, how many women are aware that there is actually the National Women's Council? The same comes to the youth. There is a National Youth Council. How many people are aware about this? The same comes to about these other organizations. How many Ugandans are actually aware that these are happening? So looking at the recent, people have been having questions about why some institutions people have been committing suicide. Perhaps because these people have not yet been guided. Their mental, psychological, maybe building has not yet been enriched. That means if you went to Chambogo and you did a census of how many people are psychologically trained, you cannot find a big percentage. That means as civil society organizations in democratization policy, that means there is a way they have not been operating with the government. They tend to ignore it. Yet the government, because it has power, it has an issue to influence your activities. That is, somebody say that Uganda is an undeveloped country. May I want to say that Uganda is a developing what?
Country.
Not just underdeveloped, because you are transiting. And looking at the generation you have today is that you are trying to look at a transformational policy making. If there used to be this in 2002, what can we do? Next year, it's supposed to actually have been this year, there is going to be the population census in this country. So that means by the time they are going to, maybe, even if initially it was 44 million, or that how many millions Ugandans, or what is going to be the impact after that in the next year. So looking at the context, you actually said it clearly, Onen. Kenya has just concluded its elections. I think I want to really thank Kenyans for having been able to make a change, because initially in the Kenyan context, they have to believe that to become a president, you must be coming from certain kind of attachment. And I think they have broken a record in that angle. That means if you are to proceed as a country and looking at the national building, I might come from Kisoro, I'm from Bila, you are maybe from Acholi, you are an Acholi, maybe he's a Muganda, maybe he's a Muteso. What one thing can we share in common? And initially, we have been trying to look at all these things as young people, that what binds us together is because we are a younger generation. So what is that common thing that you can share? You talked about it in the highlights you mentioned. But I think on what we exactly asked, if the democratization context, something of the sort. The mega, yes.
The democratization in terms of participation.
In terms of participation. I think that's okay, because even in UNSA here, you are allowed to nominate for any position, depending on where you are coming from and participate. So depending on your conviction power and your competence, level of competence, and your what you have to offer to the table, what can you offer for the students' challenges? That has been done at Uganda National Student Association. And it has been identified as a non-government organization, because by the constitution, that's how it is. So of course, the activities of this organization has been mandated by the Education Act 2008. So I think, depending on what we are talking about right now, UNSA has done its part, because it allows free participation. Once you show yourself as a competent person, then talk to the young people, the students, they have to vote for you. Then after all, you serve the young people of this country. So I think, to be real, UNSA as a body, it has done its part, though there is still more energy that is needed.
All right, fair enough. Allow me engage with Ms. Monica here to sum up the question of the mechanism for democratization. Looking at our historical background as a country, as captured in our preamble of the Constitution, it's one that is filled with tyranny, oppression, among other atrocities. As a country, we have seen various violences happening year in, year out, when elections are yet to happen. We saw one in 2020 in November. Mass killings happened. And afterwards, civil society organizations went and were advocating. Others were closed on grounds that they were getting funding for such activities. Do you think, as a nation, we have made progress in terms of democratization, in terms of accountability, in terms of representation, in terms of participation?
Thank you so much for that question. Just to go straight up to the response. In terms of representation, for example, as a country, I think women are just getting to the table now. We have not yet reached there, but at least we're now seeing more women coming up and going on for leadership positions. On
that, on the issue of representation, some people argue that women are getting spaces for representation, but out of all the members of parliament or ladies that are there, are we seeing effective representation? We may give you the positions, yes, but are we advocating?
No, I wouldn't say when it comes to now that effective representation. We have not yet gotten there. What we see right now is the numbers, but also one thing, as we women get to the leadership positions, there should also be conversations really around quality of representation, not just having a woman and we say, oh, now there is gender equality or gender equity because there's a woman maybe on this panel. But is this person actually able to drive the conversation home? Are they able to hold people accountable? So what we see happening right now is conversations have started and we're seeing women taking up those leadership roles. But we as a nation still have a lot to do, because we still see women in communities that are not free to walk to polling stations on polling dates because of the ideology of gender roles. A woman can only choose, for example, who her husband has chosen for a leadership position, or a woman cannot contest for a leadership position if she's not married. There's still those conversations. But as civil society, I see really women coming up and taking up those leadership positions. But I would say that that is really an area that we still need to focus on. I know there are very many conversations that keep going and saying, but women are being represented, or the girl child is being given more attention than the boy child. But I would say that in most cases, even these women and girls we are seeing in leadership positions are like the same people you keep seeing every now and then. But when you go to the actual grassroots, the grassroots are actually always left out of this, these processes. So when you go deep in Zomba district, where I come from, you would really find that there are very few women taking up those roles. It is just what we see from the onset.
I like to like, you know, give in a feedback on Pris's view. I like to think, yes, there's been like advocacy on including women at the table, and women are getting that. But I want to do away with that myth. I feel like in the country right now and all over, women are not just getting onto the table. Women are creating their own tables.
True.
Women are creating their own tables. Women are creating movement. And now, it's the men now to advocate to get onto the tables. Look at the leadership of Uganda right now, the structure itself. Women are influencing places of power. That is something. That is building a nation, right? We have always hustled for the girl child, for the girl child, for the girl child. But right now, we have the opportunity that the girl child is making a decision in places of power. How do we utilize these decisions to influence the grassroots as well, you know? So I think where we are right now in Uganda and maybe other countries, women are really making bold moves, and I'm very happy about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. As we have heard from the panel, it's a work in progress. And for now, we are going to go for a short commercial break. And when we return, I will engage Comrade Jolie and Comrade Hafashaimana to briefly give us their concluding views on the matters of the democratization as we delve into other catalysts of the nation building process and the roles of civil society organizations in Uganda. Stay tuned, smash the subscribe button, and stay with us. Thank you very much.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Thank you very much for staying with us, dear viewers. We love you and would like you to continue watching the Youth Roundtable. For those who have just joined us for this after the commercial break, we are discussing the role of civil society in nation building. As I said, to discuss tonight's topic, I'm joined by a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who have been quite elaborate and very, very interesting in the first half of the discussion. So before we went for the break, Comrade Jolie and Comrade Hafashaimana were supposed to give us the concluding remarks on the mechanisms of democratization as we're discussing the catalysts for nation building and the role of civil society organizations. So before we go into the other discussions, allow me give Ms. Jolie and Hafashaimana time to give their concluding views on the aspect of democratization in terms of accountability, in terms of representation, and in terms of participation. Shirley, the floor is yours.
In terms of democracy, in the role of civil societies, they have played quite a big role in that. They have tried talking to people about how to vote. They have taught them on how to vote. They have they have told them about the effects of wars, if in case that they're involved in that. They have tried teaching them on the fair elections. So I can conclude and say civil societies have played a big role in that department.
All right, thank you very much. Comrade Hafashaimana, give us your concluding views on the mechanisms of democratization.
I just want to base myself on what Mother Teresa spoke to the people before. You don't need enough to make a change. And she went ahead and said that not each of us can do great things, but we can do simple, small things with great love.
Yeah.
And an example is the Secretary for Female Affairs, Miss Kichoncho Brenda. Each and every time she celebrates her birthday in November, she makes a change to the young people. This is not because she has enough, but she believes there is always a chance to do an impact. And every time she visits like the marginalized groups of people, maybe like the young girls, the teens, and most recently she visited, we went to the Hope Care Hostel in Kawempe. These are young people who are suffering from cancer. So we go to these people to speak words of hope and encourage them how they can live a better life, that even when they're in that kind of situation, there is a chance to be better after a while. And I think what takes it all is patience. So I think as we conclude on the participatory bit of it of the democratization, the issue is doing something small with the little you have. And the civil society organizations, if it is not running away from doing their obligation, the issue is now how can we better the services offered by the indigenous institutions. Looking at the Constitution of Uganda, it gives a chance to every religious movement as long as its actions do not contradict with the activities of the government of Uganda. And I think that's why you have seen more of the religious movements coming on board.
Yeah.
If you went to Chamberlain University as an institution that is dealing with education, they have issues to do with the new religious movements, the NRM, that's how it is actually termed. So looking at each of these, has the government actually given a chance to each of countrywomen to do whatever they feel they can offer for the people of this country? Of course, looking at our neighbors in Rwanda, in Congo, there are other things to do of the sort. So I want to conclusively say that government has done its part by giving a mandate, though at some time it suffocates other people's interests, especially when it comes to the interest bit of it. So I want to say that we have something to offer as a declaration of that.
All right. All right. Very powerful. Very powerful statement. Very powerful statement. Doing the little you have, but doing it with love. Yeah. Very powerful. Well, thank you very much. Now, I would want us to look at the mechanisms of political development. But to put it into context, Kenya has had so far 5 different elections, and I've seen a plethora of presidents. That milestone of Kenya has been attributed to the strong civil society framework in Kenya. And the attribution to Kenya's milestone with the civil society organizations runs deep into the politics of the country. In 2007, we saw the killings that happened. And the civil society organizations in Kenya stood firm, advocated, held the government accountable. And today, Kenya can freely go ahead and elect leaders, go ahead and preside over presidential petitions. So in terms of the role of civil society organizations, just speaking in the context of Kenya, and what the civil society organizations in Kenya have done to ensure that the politics of the country, the service delivery, is efficiently done and equitably delivered. I would like to start with you as we come this side. I would like to start with you. What can Uganda copy, or what can Uganda do to improve the framework or the stronghold of civil society organizations in Uganda to improve our political development?
Before the electioneering process began, I think Kenya was still into the campaigning bit of it. So I had a chance to go to Nairobi with a few colleagues I work with in UNSA. And what we found out is that young people are involved in decision making and in influencing the political decisions at some point. This is not because Uganda has not done that, but I think it is not at its apex. And that means looking at the role of the civil societies, that means they are not negligible in the electioneering process in Kenya. And because each of these people have taken part, but also the presidential contenders in Kenya, they had a robust energy for mobilization. And initially, I think if it is not a month or 2 months back, we have had several discussions and dialoguing about impact of political parties in institutions of higher learning, even secondary level. And we zero it down to the extent that these would be good ideas if at all their motivation focuses at developing of the young people in this nation. And because we're looking at the nation building, have we actually learned something from the recently concluded elections in Kenya? I think to me the answer would be yes. Because looking at how each of people were consulted during elections, even after elections, the delay of declaring who has won, who has not won, things of the sort. I think there is a lift to pick as Ugandans. And because these are our brothers and sisters, because we have Ugandans who are married in Kenya, Kenyans who are married in Uganda, that means you can be a muko to our brothers there. So meaning that Uganda has something to learn. And these days I've been telling a few people I associate closely with that we are looking at how we can learn. When you learn what you didn't know before. We can also relearn what you have already known, but you can also unlearn. That's something that you feel like indeed it is not worth to be lived with. So I think there's something to learn, but also unlearn from the context of how Kenya has had its elections.
All right, thank you. I would like to engage Jolly. Uganda has a plethora of political parties in this country, and political parties oftentimes also get support from civil society organizations. And this support that civil society organizations contribute can be financial, or can even be materials in terms of other scholastic materials, etc., etc. In your opinion, is that enough? Is civil society organizations doing enough to foster the political agenda in this country?
Well, speaking of giving civil societies data and information or helping them in core funding, I think the government is doing enough in terms of, because they give them the opportunity to run these organizations in the country. They give them, we talked about 54 NGOs that were put down. We have over 2,000 NGOs in the country going. So the government has really tried. If it was to, I am not speaking for the government, but then if it was not supporting them, then there will not be 2,000 now. So there is freedom. I think they have access to data and information, and they support them in co-funding. So yes.
All right. Thank you very much. You bring out the aspect of CSO.
No. But before Ndugu, you go ahead. She just said that she's not speaking on behalf of the government, and I just wanted to keep something. Go ahead. Yes, I have always been taught that government is people, right? And I think every time you speak up, you are speaking for the people, your community, your close associates, or something of the sort. So I think what the young generation has to do is that we have to speak up, rise up, and do something.
I think she's not speaking for the governing body.
Yes, true. I want to, just from, that's what we have noticed. People oftentimes when they're speaking in Uganda, we say there's freedom of speech. And when people are speaking, now the way she has retaliated, I'm not speaking for the government. Civil society organizations are given a mandate to advocate for freedom of speech.
Yes.
We have various organizations like Center for Constitutional Governance, which is a constitutional watchdog and the one that sponsors this space. As a country, we are scared. People are scared to freely air out their voices. People are afraid to ably speak and say what they want, because if you say something, you know what will happen. So you as OSA minds, that particular aspect of freedom of speech is being affected. And if freedom of speech is being affected, definitely people are also traumatized by the effects that could possibly happen to them if they freely speak. So what role are you playing to see that people can freely speak, not having the mindset that, or being traumatized with the view that if I'm to speak and say this, something would happen to me?
I once read a quote: in Uganda you have freedom of speech, but no freedom after speech. Yeah. So, but I think still on a larger note, I think we speak quite freely.
Yeah.
And I also want to know, like, there is misuse of freedom of speech, which is attacking. If you want to speak, speak. But oftentimes people think by attacking, that is when they're speaking. If right now I say that I've not eaten food because I don't have a job, and this has been ABCD because of the government, I'm not going to be like, this government is bad, I've not eaten food because ABCD. There you're attacking, right? So we have, like, effective communication.
Yes.
Freedom of speech is like following the basics of effective communication. Your message being heard. Your message being heard the way you intend it to be heard. So oftentimes when we come on a defensive, also the other party is going to be defensive, because you are imposing certain beliefs on them that actually don't work for them, so they have to defend against. But if you come in a discussion, right, if you come to air out your views in a way that you want to be listened to and given response, you are speaking and you ought to be heard.
On that, if freedom of speech is the freedom for one to air out what they deem fit and what they feel right according to them, civil society organizations have a mandate to push that agenda. We have seen countries like Nigeria that have a very strong bedrock of the civil society, the civil society organizations, and they advocate for freedom of speech. So as civil society organizations in Uganda, yes, I know there is that part of objective or positive freedom of speech, but how best, in terms of one speaking and saying what the government has done, and it says this is wrong, this is right. If someone says and tells the government what you're doing here isn't right, and then you're attacked, isn't the aspect of freedom of speech affected? Two, if that is affected, how best can civil society organizations front an agenda that fosters the idea for people to freely speak and build the nation, because it's ideas that form a nation? That question goes to you, and you'll tap into that, then I'll ask another question.
I think there is organizations that are working towards protecting people's rights to speak.
Yeah.
But I like to agree that if you air out your views and you have been like attacked, then that is not freedom of speech itself. There is human rights defenders. There is several organizations that provide protection, that that defend people who speak out, right? However, also these organizations have been like given a mask of advocating for the foreign agenda, which becomes a very big problem, that you are imposing foreign agendas onto Uganda. So that is where the problem also comes in. Do these organizations really front the needs of the local Ugandans? That is a question for them. Because if these organizations are tending to protect the freedom of speech for Ugandans, we need to see that reflect. Yeah, and once we see that reflect and we see them pushing, that is going to create more impact. It's going to influence policies and governments on how they react when people speak, because we are coming from a local perspective. When you go to Kenya, they have a unifying language, Kiswahili. They're going to speak that language that even the kid right there is going to hear. Here, I don't know how many languages we have, to be honest. We are going to sit in a parliament or in a discussion, and if we disagree like this, we are going to channel to our languages, and everyone is going to feed what they want their fellows to hear. And that is when chaos starts. You know?
Yeah, true.
That is what chaos. How do these civil society organizations that are protecting the freedom of speech, unifying people to speak the same language? If we see that the government, or if we see that this is like negative, or we want to oppose it, how do these organizations come out then and say, you're speaking the same, you're speaking the same, you're speaking the same? How do we create a one voice?
All right. Thank you. He brings out a good point. I know you have a question pending, but I also want to add this on top of that. We said nation building rotates around use of power to create a common good, national identity, and a national language. The aspect of national language is one that leaves very many Ugandans baffled, because recently they said Kiswahili is going to be taught in schools, but I also learned Kiswahili in my Form 1 right now. I'm in my university, and I only know very few Kiswahili words. So speaking about that, I earlier on said that as a country, we do not have something that we can commonly say we fought for this. As a country, we do not have something that we commonly identify that we as Ugandans fought and identify as this. So do you think it's high time maybe we resorted to having Luganda, having English, because I know we have barriers, you see, I know we have barriers. We have over 67 indigenous communities in Uganda and very many languages. So what do you recommend we have one language? Because Kiswahili is there, but you understand what I mean.
It's a fraud language
it's still not well appreciated. So what best do you think can we identify with as Uganda in terms of language, and answer the question I also given you earlier?
Okay, thank you so much. You know, when it comes to the issue of language and what we should adopt as a national language, it's a very controversial it's a very controversial discussion to have. But in the aspect of language, now that there's that suggestion to have the Swahili as a national language in Uganda, I think it's really a good idea. My own views.
Why?
One, because if we're now looking at the East African community, you'd find that there has to be that one unifying language. And based on evidence research, you'd realize that Swahili is one common one. Looking from Kenya, from Tanzania, from DR Congo that has just joined the ESC. So if we are to still have conversations and we say now we need maybe Alura as a national language or Luganda, then I don't think we are really going towards the goal. But then when it also comes to the language, it still goes back to the aspect of young people and tapping into the younger generation. Of course, at this point, you'd find that people would have a very hard time to actually even learn 5 Swahili words. But how about we start that Swahili from nursery school? That is how we are going to actually build a nation and also be able to adapt Swahili. Because like you mentioned earlier on when we started our discussion, that this is work in progress. So work in progress, if we are to tap into young people, that is how we are able to address most of these issues, even when it comes to language and nation building.
Nation identity. Yes,
and you had asked the previous question. I think it skipped my mind.
It's okay. It's okay. We have delved the aspect of political development, and we have seen various issues coming up. But it still stands that as a country, we possibly have not started or have started on nation building. That's a matter of debate that we are here discussing. Allow me go to the aspect of peace building. The role of civil society organizations in peace building. Uganda is one country that has experienced various conflicts. We have just recently come out of a conflict communities like up in northern Uganda, what we saw that happened in Kasese. We even see other issues that come as a result of climate change, among other, disasters that are happening in our communities, in our societies. Looking at our historical perspective, from 1966 Kabaka crisis, we come to the 1971 to 1979 Amin reign conflict. We come from the 1981 to 1986 conflict. Post that, then we see the Constitution captures the aspect of unity, the aspect of reconciliation, and all the positive aspects that the NRM government came up with. Civil society organizations, when they started establishing themselves, then I'm going to cite an example of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was founded by farmers and teachers who were in unions. So parties were formed on basis of workers, unions, among others. Even if you have to go in Europe and see all that. Similarly in Uganda, just that one example, the Democratic Party. Farmers and teachers coming up and forming the party. Now, looking on what those principles are, and people fighting for peace, fighting for togetherness, fighting for one people, civil society organizations have played a very important role in that aspect, especially now in the mid-2000s when we saw the conflict that was happening in northern Uganda that took approximately 2 decades. People killed, and northern Uganda was a hotspot of civil society organizations. Yeah. So, in understanding all that, this question would go to all of you. What role has civil society organizations done to ensure that there is peace building? But not only what role has civil society done, go ahead and answer to what extent have they executed their mandate in peace building. I would start with you.
Oh, good. I think Uganda is a very peaceful country.
Yeah.
By virtue that we are here and we are not worried if there is a bullet outside. It's a very peaceful country. We are not worried. I can go out maybe and transnight and we are celebrating young people in bars. They're in entertainment. There is concerts. There are very many young people in different countries that don't have that liberty. There is that peace, but also the fact that Uganda is a member of the UN, also that makes us a peaceful country, because we are accountable. We have just concluded the Universal Periodic Review, of Uganda, and they have been reviewing what kind of commitments did Uganda make, what kind of achievements have they made, what are the new recommendations, things of the sort. So, but also I think young people going to school and studying and learning their favorite subjects and choosing what to be in the future and pursuing that, that is peace itself. The right to have a family, the right to have a religion. I like people to look at peace not only just comfort, but the structures that form peace. Yeah, the structures that form peace. Going to the hospital, receiving medical care, that is peace. So peace shouldn't only come when there is no violence in election. No, change is difficult. Yeah, change is hard. People oppose change. Even in a family where there is a man and a woman and children, there is always opposition when it comes to change. Yeah. But I like us to look at peace in terms of the structures that the country has provided. Medical care. Civil society organizations, them operating in Uganda themselves. Yeah. We know countries where there is only one TV station and you have to watch that. Yeah. You cannot exit the country, you have to stay.
Yeah.
We know those countries. Yeah. But in Uganda you can exit and come back.
All right.
You have that freedom. Yeah, the civil society organizations also that have the room to go and register, knowing that actually they are going to go against the government, but still being given the permit to operate. Yeah? You would call that what? Peace. To do what you please. So, and also these organizations go ahead to put the government and the governing body to accountability. That, you know, people need this, we need to provide food, we need to go to refugee camps, we need to do ABCD. These are all civil society organizations that are actually promoting peace, but also putting the accountability, but also serving to the mandate.
All right.
Yes.
Fair enough. Allow me to engage with you, Ms. Monica. Uganda is known to be a good host to a number of refugees. He says Uganda is peaceful. I would contest, but we shall later see, because if peace is just not only comfort, then how about peace of the mind? Are people peaceful in their minds? That's something we shall answer. I'll still on you. Uganda is known to be a place whereby we host a plethora of refugees. Yeah. So in terms of our hospitality and generosity in hosting all these refugees, we have seen a number of organizations that are refugee tailored towards helping them. Do you think that these civil society organizations that are helping refugees are doing enough? If they're doing enough, do you think they deserve more support to help, because the government doesn't have enough resources in terms of peace building in the country and in East Africa, because we host a plethora of them?
Well, speaking on that, I'm going to give 2 examples of the civil society organizations that are playing part in human rights abuses and peace building, and also they're advocating for an end to wars. For example, we have Aman Institute Uganda, we have Center for Conflict Resolution. All those civil society organizations and many more others, they're playing a big role in those refugee camps. They're talking to those people. Imagine if they were not talking to them, a conflict would begin from there. And most conflicts or most wars begin with poverty. Yeah, poverty, if people don't have what to eat. So those civil society organizations have played a very big role, I must say this. They're talking to those people, speaking to them, speaking to their mind, giving them what to eat. They have really played a very big role in peace building.
All right. Allow me to engage you, sir. Looking at from where she picked in terms of peace building, and she brings up the aspect of the civil society organizations playing a big role. I want you to answer the aspect of peace in terms of freedom of speech. Peace, as he said, peace is only the aspect of, he looked at the peace should only be the aspect of comfort. But I cited out that we can be peaceful, there are no guns being fired here and there, but we're not peaceful in our minds. People are poor, people are illiterate, people do not have the means to survive. What roles or what has civil society organizations done to ensure that that Ugandans are peaceful in their minds, peaceful in their pockets?
But I get your question. Let me just start from there.
Yeah.
Issues to do with peace, they have not just begun. And the little experience I have shared with people around me is that this has traced way back the times of economic depression in Europe. And looking at the First World War between 1914-18, the war that lasted for about 4 and 3 months, there was the Versailles Peace Treaty of the 1919, and that ushered the world into the League of Nations. And each of those were trying to see how they can have over a long peace for a very long period of time, and to prevent and to control further aggressions that would be through dialoguing between the countries, between the states and nations, all through. And Samuel Wilson put the 14-point program that was more of a challenging of the 10 commandments that was given to us by the Almighty God. And in his 14-point program, he puts it clear. Peace was not only going to be observed through avoiding gun shootings, but also economic empowerment. That means if we are not doing well economically, we don't have peace in that area economically. And I would try to see peace only just because of security, but I think security is the key point.
Sure.
Because you cannot proceed with other activities unless you have peace as a country. And looking at the Africa Mashariki, she talked about it, the East African community, we have just had the admission of DRC into the ESC. But also other countries have tried to apply, maybe like Somalia, to see if they can, maybe because they're not doing well peacefully and is in the gun peace and whatnot, but also their economy. And maybe what we need to look at the comparison is that, are we actually doing better economically than these other countries? I don't want to say yes, because Kenya should be above and performing better than Uganda economically. That means they have expressed peace in that category. Looking at countries like Tanzania, if you went to Dodoma or Arusha, how are the structures there? I mean, how is the economic empowerment of these people? Now, having analyzed and being cognizant of all of those dimensions, we want to dissect whether Uganda has actually lived to not only the peace we are seeing here, going to bars, getting back home at any time you want. Yes, Uganda has done that as a country, and I think we want to recommend the government for that in that case. But now, how else best can we actually have empowerment? At today, as we look at the civil societies, one of these days I was trying to share with my circles that can we try to look at 4 things? And the 4 things we're trying to look at: mobilization of the young people. We are trying to look at the engagement. Can we start engagement? That is advocacy, that is benchmarking. If, for example, you are into that organization and I'm in this other organization, what can you share in common that you can push a similar agenda? You talked about commonality. If you're talking about, that was the second. The third is empowerment. After that, we are looking at the Women for Change in Zambia. What do we have in Uganda? We have maybe the National Women's Council, we have the National Youth Council for the Young People, we have these other young people's movements. What is that we can push together to achieve a common goal? Then after engagement and empowerment, I would trying at delivery, service delivery now. So as we take time and trying to dialogue and benchmarking with these other people that within, maybe within outside and within Uganda, the diaspora, what best can you offer? What can we deliver? So I think the civil societies have an obligation to ensure that they deliver at the end of the day. Even when they are facing the financial constraints, how best can they benchmark to get more funding? I mean, I said earlier on that you can do simple things with the little you have. The other year when I was in my work, I decided to be giving like my good shirt to a friend, or I buy because I felt like there's something I can offer. Apart from when COVID came in, of course, you know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Allow me to engage you, Ms. Monica. Civil society organizations such as Refugee Law Project went ahead in the early 2000s to foster peace between the peace in South Sudan. They came up with Beyond Juba agreement, and we have seen civil society organizations playing not only an important role within Uganda, but also in maintaining and fostering peace within the East African region. Looking at that example as a benchmark of maintaining peace in Uganda and outside Uganda, how best can civil society organizations keep on doing such work and fostering peace not only within the country, but also outside Uganda as well?
Okay, I would love to say that, one, resource mobilization is key when it comes to peace building, because in one way or another, for example, if we are talking of peace in terms of sexual reproductive health and rights, you would realize that health services, as much as it is said that you can walk to a facility and you're able to get health care at no cost, you'd find that especially in these communities, let me say border districts, I'll bring to the point of host communities and refugee settlements. You'd realize that in these communities, as much as they would say, oh, you need a national ID first to show that you're Ugandan to access the service, or your refugee ID. So I would really think that when it comes to the aspect of resource mobilization, it's really quite important, but also to note that we should not just leave it at that, but also build capacity of young people especially.
Yeah.
Because the moment you build their capacity and you're able to give them the information that you actually have a right to this and you have a right to that.
Yeah.
Information is power. And before you know it, if a young person or even any other person is aware of what they need, then they can be able to hold people accountable to make sure that these things are actually being put in place and being implemented in the right way. So if we just do this peace building as CSOs and leave the communities that we serve, if we just do it, for example, as staff in an organization or as the panels or the panel on this show, then it would be in vain. But if we go out there and we mobilize and be able to get resources, but go on and pass on that that knowledge and be able to create that awareness in the communities that, you know, there is a right to speech, there is a right to food, there is a right to shelter, then we shall be able to really build a nation in terms of peace building.
All right. Thank you.
But I think, Onen, there is something I didn't talk about, especially when you ask each of us to contribute whether we should have one language, depending on the tribes we have in Uganda. You see,
I saw his face change.
The fact is that we are all human beings, and because each of us has been created in the image of God, and because we have not chosen to belong where we are, then you have to embrace that. You talked about identity. We cannot look at the national identity before you look at where you are coming from. If he's maybe if she's a Kakwa, if she's a Munyankole, if she's a Muchiga or Mufombira or a Kumam, I think speaking Kumam is not a problem.
No.
And neither speaking Uganda is not a problem. I think the issue is that what brings us all together at the end of the day, what do we share in common? And I was trying to look at this angle at the point whereby if, for example, we are having Kiswahili being introduced to East African cross borders, I think this is a nice idea, because at the end of the day, if I cannot speak Uganda, if I cannot speak Runyankole, if I can't speak Acholi fluently, then that means the other binding language is English and Kiswahili. And because of the Africa Mashariki, we are trying to see how best to communicate to my friend in Tanzania. Something of the sort. Of recent, there is the common market for Africa, continental free trade, something of the sort. So how can that be achieved unless we can communicate either in English, cross borders, but also Kiswahili? And looking at the compulsory emphasis of teaching Kiswahili in, I think from primary up to higher education, I think that is something that maybe in 5 years or 10 years time it is going to, you know, sometimes I try to speak some little Kiswahili just because of the friends I speak to. Maybe because I got my senior 1 and senior 2 Kiswahili lessons. And minus that, maybe it would have been so difficult to liaise up with a friend from cross borders. And looking at countries like DRC, that has been colonized by the French or by France, I think if there was also a chance to teach some of these languages, of recent we at the Cuban embassy, in Cuba they speak Spanish, I'm told. So what are there any other space whereby you can actually learn these languages apart from maybe, can there be short courses by the way, such that the person who is no longer in primary, who is no longer in secondary, has a chance to again be taught Kiswahili? If the focus is being focused at these other people who are upcoming, what about this other business person? What about this other lawyer or a doctor who is no longer maybe into this academia angle? So how are they going to benefit from to learning these languages? So an issue to do whether I speak this local language or whether I speak what, the issue is understanding and identity. And I think having identity, it's okay, unless you don't take it for pride, by the way. But it's a belonging as a generation.
All right, thank you very much. All right.
Just an addition to that, it just came to my mind that even as we bring the aspect of the national language, are we as a country also being intentional around having interpreters for people living with disabilities? Because now, if we are talking about bringing Swahili, that is a new concept to Uganda, for example. If peace and people on this panel can complain about perceiving what they're saying in the Swahili word. How many people in Uganda are able to be interpreters for those living with disabilities?
Through inclusion.
Yes.
All right. As we come to the closure of the show, I would like to pick your minds and parting shots to briefly tell us, as young people in spaces, as young abled minds in spaces, in your spaces, as a founder of the Nile Girls Forum, you're founder, you're a public manager, and you're the Secretary General of UNSA. How best can we include more young people in your spaces? And not only can we include young people in your spaces, what can we do as young people to foster nation building or to build a nation? Answer that question and you can give your parting shots and say bye to the viewers. I'll start from you.
All right, thank you so much. Inclusion of young people is just not about really inclusion, it's about meaningful inclusion. Because if you're now talking about meaningful inclusion, that's when we are talking about the young people living with disabilities, the ones living with HIV, the ones affected by displacement, or what we call the refugees, but also the controversial topics of the key populations. So if we can have conversations around building a nation, and then none of those people are included, even in the processes of coming up with these policies, let me say, bringing them on board and making sure that they are part of processes and designs of programs and all these things. I think, for me, if we are to achieve building a nation, then there should be that meaningful inclusion, but also meaningful participation, not just for the sake of putting numbers and saying, now we have maybe 10 people affected by displacement that are able to also contest for leadership positions, or how many people are actually being included when it comes to planning for people living with disabilities. Are the people in those processes just able-bodied people like me and you? Do we actually have a representative there that represents the actual views of that population we are talking about? So for me, I think even when we're having these discussions, there should already be that inclusion just in the representation. For example, the next time here, we can make it a diverse panel so that we capture the views of each and every person. But also, just to give my parting shots, I would like to say that, especially when it comes to the aspect of freedom of speech, one thing is that we should do it with responsibility. Because oftentimes we just air out something for the sake of airing it out. We need to have that responsibility that what I'm actually airing out, do I have evidence? Am I talking from facts? Am I talking from emotions or just feelings? So if we are to be able to make sure we have that evidence, then we shall be able to hold our duty bearers accountable. Because I cannot just come and talk about something here based on how I feel. It should be about what is actually on ground. So thank you so much for having me on this panel. It has been a very interesting one, and I look so forward to other engagements.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miss Monica, for that. Comrade Don.
I think for me, this panel has been very great. It came like on a very short notice, but I said I have to attend because we are all building a nation, regardless of which, tools we are using. We are all building a nation. And I also believe the different young people, even in nursery, by going to school, they are also contributing to
building a nation.
And by being informed and educated, So that is very beautiful. However, from the angle I'm standing in, which is advocacy and mental health, I like everyone to consider their mental well-being, their mental health. This is not just a state of you waking up and moving on, but it's a state of how do you feel on a daily basis. Are there patterns that are really affecting your daily routines? Are you able to check in with a friend as you do? Is it just about competition, or you really having a human heart? Because we see there is a point where competition and wanting to do more supersedes the humanity in us. Even I am not going, let them go, let them be. But if you reflect and take a step back,
Yeah.
are you really being the person you really need to be in the community? Because if you're not being the person you really need to be, you are taking us backwards because you are imposing your beliefs. Yeah, you're not building, you are imposing, of which those can be broken easily. We have seen incompetent politicians who have been swept. Yeah? But because they came to impose their beliefs. So I like us to, you know, put our mental health into consideration. I like us to speak more about it. I like us to have inclusive conversations. And also Mind Speaks prides itself in human-centered design. Most of our programs are based on human-centered design, where we go in the community. Before we craft any program, we go in the community itself and we talk to the beneficiaries themselves. You know, we talk to them, what would work for you? How should we structure it? Where can we do it? You know, how can you be part? And they bring in their ideas. What is the problem? We're not going to go on the internet and search the problem and write a statement. We are going to go quote a problem from a young person down there. That a young person from a community, ABCD, said this is the problem they're facing. And exactly that is the problem. But if we quote statistics of, you know, 14 million young people in Uganda facing mental health, who are those 14 million people? Yes, they are there, but who are they? We don't know them yet. We can't render service to them. But if I went in a community and I see this young person and they tell me, this is my problem, I am able to directly give a service, you know, and do that. So I like us also as civil society organizations not to make decisions in boardrooms. Let's not sit in boardrooms and make decisions. Let's go take this conversation down there. How can we do this dialogue differently? Can we take it down in Bwaise? Can we take it down, you know, in a slum somewhere, or in a community where even young people can put in their views on what we are speaking? Have we covered actually the topics that they're interested in? You know, have we given in the view that actually is going to, you know, go back to them? So we need to really think about it. As I end up, I like to thank everyone who has been on the panel. It's been very insightful. And also I want to commend people, you know, to be vigilant. Be vigilant. It costs you nothing to be kind, but it costs you everything to be rude. You know? So let's try to be kind. Let's give in to one another. Let's help support one another. And also reach out to Mind Speaks in case you need, you know, attachment to a therapist, a counselor, you need referrals, you need mental health information to make informed decisions. We are open to partnerships. And also if the National Youth Council has some money, we are also open to the money itself.
All right. Thank you very much. Miss Monica, Miss Molly.
Yes, it's Jolly.
Jolly, yes.
So,
Mbabazi.
Mbabazi Jolly.
yes. So, talking of the youth, what we are supposed to do to help in nation building, peace building, and etc. In my view, I want to say that I want the youth or us to engage ourselves in civil activities. For example, we join police, we join the army, we focus on our education so that it can help for the brighter future of our country. You know, they say that a country that has a responsible youth, that responsible youth will definitely lead a country to a better future. So let's engage ourselves in civil activities. Let's help advocate for the good cause of civil societies and other engagements in the country. Thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure, and I'm glad I met these knowledgeable people, and I look forward to other engagements.
Thank you.
Symbolization.
Thank you very much, Miss Jolly. You mentioned that people should join the army. Are you joining the army? All right, Mr. Hafashaimana.
Asante sana. I think I want to conclude this by being thankful to the civic space management, but also the viewers who have never given up. And I think that's the way to go. And recently, I was with a few young men, I think in university, and we met one of our lecturers, and he was trying to encourage the young people how, in case they're in their final semesters, they should focus at saving, such that as they wind up and graduate with university, they have some little startup capital to begin some simple business around to keep a young person moving. The reason is because many people are studying, and you cannot wait for the government to give you a job. That means you have to be self-employed in that way case. So I think my message to the young people who are viewing us, look at something you can do better than what you have been doing. And you have also your friends, your other colleagues who are involved into businesses, support them, and they can also support you. And looking at the 4 pillars of the ruling party, the NRM, they have, or there is an issue to do with the social economic transformation, but also Pan-Africanism. And looking at the ongoing, the parish development model, I guess we are taking decisions and steps to ensure that each of the young people can benefit, especially those who qualify, depending on where you are coming from, I mean the family background. Yeah. So, but also to our clients who are our students, national, countrywide, we have something to offer. Yes, these are our people that we serve. These are our people. So simply network, make meaningful relationships, make informed decisions, and make sure that you stay in touch, get informed, and you have everything to do. All right. We have to say thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much to the panel, Comrade Hafashaimana, Miss Jolie, Comrade Don Zane Muwanguzi, and Miss Pimer Monica Peace. I think I've got it right. To our viewers outside there, thank you for keeping it locked to Civic Space TV. Thank you for watching the Youth Roundtable. To the management team and the production team, thank you very much, Rashid and the team. We appreciate. Stay locked to Civic Space TV and subscribe and continue following the conversations there. Thank you very much for staying with us. We look forward to seeing you next time.